And we all said if they carry on coming across in these numbers when the winter sets in and the weather gets bad, people are going to die. Today it happened. This is now a massive all-round problem for the Prime Minister. Our confidence in his leadership is damaged, to say the least.
I agree, Kevin. I think it's a multitude of issues. I mean, I've never been a fan of Boris Johnson. I've always thought that he's basically emperor's new clothes. What he should have done is basically continued with his career with a particular turn of phrase that appeals to a certain audience in the Spectator or the Telegraph or whatever. But he's unfit for purpose as a prime minister. Yes, he's a very good salesman. There's a certain type of person that they warm to Boris with some of his mannerisms and so on, but if you scratch the surface, it's like a hollow Easter egg. There's nothing there. And the migrant issue, what's happening in the Channel right now, is a perfect example of this. It's all talk and bluster and a few Latin words, but actually not any plan. I talked about this with you last week. This is a serious issue with a number of serious issues that require a proper, well thought out delivery plan that will probably involve Britain and France rather than scoring points off each other. And you combine that with all the other stuff in terms of how he's parading around at COP, the whole HS2 issue, what's happened with the sleaze scandal. Boris Johnson, and I think more people are recognizing this, Boris Johnson is an unfit for purpose prime minister. I think he's now being found out, and I think day by day more and more people are recognizing that. What we need in this country is someone who gets things done in the right way. Now, I was no fan of Margaret Thatcher. I disagree with a lot of her politics. But most people in the country, whether they agreed with her or not, looked at her and thought, there is someone who is able to do the job, whether they agree with the ideology or not. Boris Johnson doesn't have an ideology. All he does is literally paper over the cracks, come up with nothing. And what's happened today in the Channel is a perfect example of that.
Successful leaders, I think, must have a handle on the concerns, the everyday concerns of the citizens who they lead. And Boris Johnson has spent the last 6 months going on about floating green windmills, solar panels, his green industrial revolution. By the way, folks, it's going to cost you hundreds of extra pounds, both in tax and your utility bills, but we're going to be green. We're going to save the planet. What he didn't seem to have a handle on was that the people of this country have been and continue to be very, very concerned and worried about the migrant crisis. You could hardly ever get our Prime Minister to even let the subject pass his lips. And when he did, he just sort of impotently blamed the French for not doing enough. I've always said that it's all very well to keep pointing the finger at France, and they do bear a lot of responsibility. But the fact of the matter is they just don't really care, and they never will do anything. It is our responsibility to get something done about this crisis, and we've got to somehow or other persuade these poor people not to come across this dangerous and, as we discovered today, lethal stretch of water. And Boris Johnson has got to get together with the Home Secretary and I guess the French today and really work something out as a matter of some urgency now.
I completely agree. This issue has been going on for quite a long time. It's not even just about the Channel issue, it's about a national debate, as I talked about last week, about immigration. I think most people would understand that there is benefits to immigration, but there has to be the right procedure. So they have to be, for instance, link-ups and partnerships with businesses. They have to have structures of registration and employment when they arrive. But we have a Prime Minister who is just broad brushing everything. And I'm like you, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of having basically the worst prime minister at the worst time, the worst opposition at the worst time. And the public are looking at all of this and going, where do I go? I don't think that basically the public want either the current government or the opposition. I think the majority of people in this country want the streets to be safe. They want a functioning NHS. They want good schools for the kids. They want to feel safe. They want prospects for their community. And at the moment, they're looking at politicians from all sides who are just bluster, and people are fed up. Where is the alternative?
Yeah.
I think it's a pretty simple premise, Kevin, in this country. Most people want the same things. Yeah. There is a social contract that we pay our taxes to get decent public services and decent government. And yet we get sleaze. We don't get any decisions. We get governments on COVID flipping around all over the place that causes the public to be really confused about what to do.
Yeah.
But underneath that, there is a silent majority that just thinks, hold on here, there's got to be something better. And I don't know what that better is, but it's certainly not what we've got at the moment.
I think it's extraordinary that a prime minister or a politician like Boris Johnson, who staked his political career on Brexit, on backing Brexit, gets into power and then doesn't seem to give a damn about the fact that people voted for Brexit because they wanted our sovereign borders to be sealed. He just doesn't seem to care about this. As I said earlier, Priti Patel certainly cares. She certainly makes all the right noises, but she seems utterly impotent to actually do anything about it. Now, the Boris Johnson has today been forced right into the thick of it, and perhaps now finally he will realise that the borders, our borders, and the migrant crisis are a critical issue for his future.
I completely agree. It comes back to that point about immigration. I think the majority of people want roughly the same thing. They understand the benefits, but they want a structure in place to reap the benefits and also separate out the aspects of it that are wrong. The whole thing that's been going on in the Channel at the moment has been going on for a while. And all it is, and I think the French are just as much to blame as the UK government on this. It is literally tit for tat. There's no solutions. And there's people dying. I feel incredibly sorry for these migrants who are at a stage in life where they see a zero-sum game, where they're either escaping tyranny or poverty, to make that trip. But if they're making that trip, there has to be a structure beyond that whereby government is working out their pathway. And it's not just a pathway of when they get to the UK, they are safe, but it's also this, they've got to be safe in terms of an international agreement about who is taking migrants. But at the same time, I would suggest a sub-department within the government that actually works out what happens to these refugees, migrants, when they arrive in the UK. So it's all structured. And it's classic Johnson. It's about point scoring against the French, bluster, but no hard solution. And it happens on an issue-by-issue basis, not just this.
Yeah, as I say, just pointing the finger at the French, it's valid. It's legitimate. They don't do enough, but they never will. We have to sort this problem out. You know, it was incredible, I thought, was it last week, when suddenly the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, was pointing the finger at our dysfunctional asylum system. And you want to go, yes, you're right, Priti. And last time I looked, you're in charge of it. Do something about it. That is the problem. When they get here, they enter this morass, this ridiculous system where basically we put them into hotels and they can just walk out. It's nonsense. So we've got to get to grips with this. And as we always said, if they carry on coming over in the numbers that they have been, at the rate sometimes of more than 1,000 a day in winter condition, lives will be at stake. And today we found out in the most awful way that we were right. 33 people dead, including, by the way, 5 women and 2 little kids. It really is an awful tragedy that brings into sharp focus just how critical this crisis is. Let's just quickly, since we're on the topic of Boris Johnson, I mean, how much longer can he go on like this? As I said earlier, this has been, he has just stumbled in the last 3 weeks or so from one disaster to the next. Owen Paterson, the sleaze row, the social care mess. He just about got his social care bill through, but not by enough. It'll have to be changed. HS 1.5, the railway system he promised, isn't coming off. His high taxing green obsession that isn't conservative, and I don't think concerns as many people as he thinks. And of course, you know, that sort of car crash of a CBI speech he made yesterday, you do have to ask the question, how much longer can he go on like this?
Well, he was doing all this, Kevin, when he was Foreign Secretary. I mean, this is Boris Johnson. I mean, he, as I said earlier, he's emperor's new clothes. And I think what's happening is that people are now realizing this. It's not enough for this country to have some sort of light-hearted buffoon in charge of our country.
Right.
What we need, I would rather have the most boring individual who's on top of their brief to just do the basics. Ideally, what I want is someone who basically is on top of the basics in terms of on top of their brief, but at the same time, they offer a bit of guidance about where this country should be going. Boris Johnson has flipped around on so many issues. You could argue that he flipped around on Brexit, the whole kind of rumor about whether he had, two articles about whether he's Remain or Brexiter, right through to, flipping around on COVID all over the place, the sleaze aspect which he's not got on top of, and trying to suppress that. And yet, that speech the other day, I think is a tipping point for Boris Johnson.
I agree with you, James.
I mean, you've done speeches. I've done speeches in my entire life, but I've never had a point where I've ended up like that.
Yeah.
He's our prime minister, and he came across like a sort of scene from the thick of it, where he's muttering under his breath, and he's shuffling papers and so on. That is unacceptable from a prime minister.
I think
probably some people would get away with that, but because he won't get away with it, because it's just a conveyor belt of catastrophe with Boris Johnson. And I think the public are looking at this now in a very serious, grave era, that they don't want a prime minister like that. And I think he's on the run now.
And I think a lot of senior Tories feel the same, and they have written letters of no confidence. He's in a bad state at the moment. Last night I had the Sun's extremely experienced political commentator Trevor Kavanagh on the show, who's not wont to make excessive exaggerated statements, and he said, mark my words, unless Boris Johnson gets a grip, raises his game, and breaks out of this morass of disaster that he seems to be enmeshed in all the time now. He said in 1 year's time we will have a different prime minister. And I do think Boris is now staring into the abyss unless he can somehow or other get his act together. James, fantastic to talk to you as always. Thank you so much for your time. James Melville there, Managing Director of East West Communication Consultancy and a social and political commentator.